for us to discuss about the scriptures as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I really don't need to introduce my guest this afternoon, Dr. Vivek Debroy. We all know him. He's a very foremost Sanskrit scholar. Not only the Sanskrit scholar, he's an eminent economist, but he's and has been serving the government of India for the last couple of years in more than one way. He has published many academic articles, books. He has translated Mahabharata, unabridged version of Mahabharata, to use his own word, and Ramayana into English, from Sanskrit into English. And there are 10 volumes of it, which makes around 2.5 million. I was just watching your YouTube interview. That's how I came to know about the number of words as well. So we can now, he's a polymath, in fact. If you look, he knows about economics. He's a Sanskrit scholar. He has done a lot of translations. He knows many things about the Indian society and scriptures. So it's a really difficult, really difficult for me to ask the question to the persons like Dr. Debroy. But it's a honored and privileged for me to have a conversation with you, sir. And I will just begin. Since you are an accomplished economist, you have done a lot. You have written a lot of, the books and papers on economics. But at the same time, you're also involved in the translation for the last couple of years. I just wanted to ask you, what motivated you to do the translations of the Itihasa and Puranas, basically the scriptures? Why have you been doing these translations? Since, again, to use your own word, there are a lot of translations of that type floating in the market. Then how does your translated works different from the other work that is available in the market?
Thank you and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, we heard the use of the word dharma. Dharma cannot, should not be translated as religion. Dharma is something that holds up society. It holds up the fabric of society. Dharate saha dharma. So dharma has many different facets. The session is about Bharatvarsha, but some of what I will say will also resonate in Nepal, because I am going to talk about Hindu dharma. Use the word scripture. I would prefer to use the word shastra. What are the shastras of Hinduism? If you ask most people, they will say that the shastras of Hinduism are linked to Vedanta. They are the Upanishads, they are the Bhagavad Gita, those kinds of things. In our system of things, there were 4 ashramas: Garhastha, before that Brahmacharya, Garhastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. Very few of us will go on Vanaprastha. Very few of us will become sannyasis. Most of us will be grihasthas. We will be householders. We will follow the dharma of householders. It is this sansar, the cycle of worldly existence, We are born into it, we die, we are reborn. Amongst crores and crores of us, only a few will ever aspire for moksha from samsara. Even if we aspire for moksha from samsara, very few of us will get it. The point I am making is things like Vedanta, things like the Aranyaks, things like the Upanishads, they were composed, if that is the word to use, by people who are in Vanaprastha and people who are in Sannyas. They are about the other world. And hence, there is a suggestion that typically emanates from Orientalists in the West that Hinduism is not interested in this world. Hinduism is about the other world. So if you go back and look up the texts that under Max Muller's editorship were translated in Sacred Books of the East series, they were about Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, a little bit of literature, Kalidasa, and a bit of the Dharma Shastras. If we want to find out what our Shastras say about what we should be doing as Grihasthas, we will not find answers in Ashtavakra Gita. Normally, we may find answers in Vyadha Gita, but typically we will not find answers even in the Bhagavad Gita. So which text should we look for? We are told that the Pancham Veda is Itihasa and Purana. Because the Pancham Veda tells us what we should do in terms of imbibing the lessons of the Vedas and practicing them in our everyday life. Let me leave Valmiki Ramayana out of it because Valmiki and the Ramayana is slightly different. But Itihasa, as in the Mahabharata, and the Ashtadash Mahapuranas were all composed by Krishna Dvaipayan Veda Vyasa. You asked me a question about why am I translating them. They have, when I say translating into English. The Mahabharata, there are only 3 unabridged translations of the Mahabharata in English. Only 3. The first 2 were done by Kishori Mohan Ganguly in the 1880s. The second one by Manmathanath Datta in the 1890s. And the third one is mine. Most of the stuff that you see floating around are not unabridged translations. They are brief retellings. They are like summaries, so they tend to simplify. Your question had a question about the economy. When discussing the economy, people will use the word governance. It's a buzzword now. Everyone uses the word governance. The World Bank uses it. It has got a set of governance indicators it uses to rank countries, different countries in the world. As Hindus, shouldn't we ask, economy or economics as a discipline is dated to Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations in 1776. Was there no economics before that? Did Hindus not think about these issues? Did they not think about governance? If so, where are those texts? If I ask the audience, you will tell me Kautilya Arthashastra. By the way, Kautilya's Arthashastra as a manuscript was completely lost until Shama Shastri rediscovered it in 1905 and translated it. There is much more in our Shastras about governance than just Kautilya. A lot. A large part of that is in Itihas and Purana. For example, everyone knows about the Mahabharata. And therefore, you know that in the Mahabharata, there is an extensive section called Shanti Parva, where Bhishma is lying down on his bed of arrows and is instructing Yudhishthir and his brothers. Here is a proposition. A rich man who's guilty of a crime should not be imprisoned, because it is at the cost of the public exchequer. Only a poor man who cannot afford to pay should be imprisoned. You may or may not agree with that value judgment, but it has an impeccable logic of its own. If I asked you in isolation who said it, you will probably say it's the University of Chicago people, the law and economics guys who have said it. No, it's said by Bhishma to Yudhishthira. These are the 19 most important kind of civil cases that you should try in order of priority. Who said it? Bhishma to Yudhishthira. And right at the bottom, thousands of years ago, right at the top, thousands of years ago, was breach of contract. Unfortunately, knowledge of Sanskrit is dying out. People who know Sanskrit either are not proficient in English or they are not interested in translating these texts. They will translate the Vedas, the Upanishads. Therefore, there was this vacuum, and hence I have done this translation. I am doing this translation. Mahabharata, Valmiki, Ramayana, Harivansha, and I have started on the Puranas. The Mahabharata, by the way, is believed to have 100,000 shlokas, which translates into about 2.5 million words. The 18 Puranas together have 400,000 shlokas, so it will be something like 12 to 13 million words. So let me stop there.
Thank you very much. I really wanted to ask you one more question about Mahabharata and Ramayana. Why they are called Itihasa, whereas Puranas are not necessarily called Itihasa? One question. The second question, that you talked about the Shanti Parva. Perhaps it is the one of the best documents where you can draw many lessons about the governance. We do not necessarily need to refer to the many documents that are available, or again, to use your own words, floating around on governance, on the state, society, lessons, many things. But people don't really read that Sandhi Parva. People come up with different things these days. You are talking about, in one of your YouTube, you were asked a question, and I'm also going to ask you the same question here. I think that might be much, that's the issue, the most debated, most talked about subject in this country as well these days. The Eklavya, Dronacharya did not necessarily teach archery to Eklavya. Instead, he did it for Arjuna. And a lot of blames, he has been, Dronacharya has been blamed for that. He did not teach Eklavya primarily because he comes from a Nishad family, and in today's terms, he is from the scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, something like that. That's the one proposition, and that somehow portrays Mahabharata in a different way. Second question, I think I will ask you from the Ramayana. It's the same story, same questions. The Ram, a lot of good things in Ramayana as well. Again, when the Ramayana, there are only 6 Kand. The Uttarakhand, I think, has been added later. That's what I came to know, but I'm sure you will enlighten us on that as well. When Sita has to go through a lot of Agni Pariksha, and people talk about that, when they talk about gender justice today, they give the examples from that Uttarakhand, which was added later, and portray Ramayana and Ram for that reason from a different perspective. So there are different types, the way people understand and perceive these texts. As also, there are some issues there. If we don't, the people like you, who are really learned person, who knows about the Eastern philosophy and the Western social science, can have a duty to, inform the people in the right way. See, this is the right thing. May I just ask you to enlighten on this, please?
That's quite a bunch of questions, so let me try and do justice to this. My plea to everyone is please read the original texts. Because any version that you find floating around on the net, on WhatsApp forwards, is not necessarily exactly what happened. So please read the original text, preferably in Sanskrit. If you can't read it in Sanskrit, well, you have no option but to read my translations. Let me start with Ram. But before that, a minor thing. Anyone that is asked today, how many kandas does Valmiki Ramayana have? The answer will be 7 kandas. And people will say Uttar Kanda is an interpolation. How many parvas does Mahabharata have? People will say 18 parvas. But please do understand these texts evolved over a period of time through a process of oral transmission. They were recited. And the Parva classification or the Kanda classification came much later. We have the texts as they exist today. That does not mean that the original texts were divided into 7 Kandas or the Mahabharata was divided into 18 Parvas. Internally in the text of the Mahabharata, there is a suggestion that it originally had 100 Parvas. Exactly similarly, I can point to shlokas in Uttarkanda that are clearly old, and I can point to sections in Balakanda which are clearly later. So let us not have this very simple and convenient proposition that Uttarkanda was a later interpolation. All of Uttarkanda was a later interpolation. Large parts were, but not all of it, and similarly the older parts in Balakanda also. I was saying that Rama's character is an impossible character to understand. And when we don't understand someone's character, we say we disagree. Now let's be clear what we are saying. We can say that in his shoes I would have not done the same thing. But that is not quite the same thing as not appreciating the reason why he did something. How does the Valmiki Ramayana start? It starts with Valmiki asking, in this world today, who amongst human beings has the following characteristics? And one word that is used is Satya Sandha. Loosely translated, devoted to the truth. Satya also means pledge. To understand Rama, we need to understand that the overriding theme for Rama was that if I have given my word, I will not budge from my word. Come what may, I will not deviate from my word, from my pledge. There are very few amongst us who are capable of doing this. So the pledge that was given by his father, he accepted upon himself because it was a pledge. You did not mention the Sugriv Vali episode. People ask, why did he unfairly kill Vali? But before that, Sugriv and Rama had gone around the fire and taken steps together. 7 steps together. Today we have reduced it to a marriage rite, Saptapadi, taking 7 steps around the fire. But taking 7 steps together around a fire, taking 7 steps together meant you and I are a friend, and taking those 7 steps around the fire meant you were taking a pledge. So what is the pledge? The pledge is Sugriv has said, I will do whatever I can to get Sita back, and Rama has said, I will do whatever I can to make you king. Now that's the pledge. In the process, if I have to kill Vali, I will kill Vali. Similarly, when we think of the Rama-Sita relationship, let us not try and use today's husband and wife relationship. Today's husband and wife relationship is a completely new notion. There are many words for wife. In this context, the relevant word is Sahadharmini. We are traversing the path of Dharma together. Rama's Dharma as a king is to uphold the interests of the subjects. That's the pledge I've taken as a king. That overrides everything else. So if the subjects are unhappy because Shambhuka is chanting the Vedas, my pledge overrides everything. If the subjects are questioning Sita, then that overrides everything. We often think of Sita's banishment. We do not remember that at the drop of a hat, Rama banished Lakshmana, his companion, for years and years. Rama was on secret consultations, Lakshmana was at the gate, and Lakshmana had been warned that he will not allow anyone to come inside. If I allow anyone to come inside, I will kill you. Forget the details of the story, but because Lakshmana allowed a rishi to come inside, at the drop of a hat, Rama exiled Lakshmana. So if we want to understand Rama's character, let's not just look only at Sita, let's look at also what he did to Lakshmana. And by the way, Valmiki Ramayana and Mahabharata, there are many different versions. Some of them are non-Sanskrit versions. I think you mentioned that for the Ramayana, there is the Vashishta Ramayana in Sanskrit, there is the Adhyata Ramayana in Sanskrit. Whenever people were unhappy with the portrayal of Rama's character, they came along and composed another Ramayana, not quite the Mahabharata, Ekalavya. Another incident that is widely commented upon without necessarily reading the text. I have 2 or 3 responses. Scheduled tribes. Who are scheduled tribes? Scheduled tribes are a classification brought about by the British. So if you're trying to understand something thousands of years ago, must we resort to a classification introduced by the British? Ekalavya was a Nishada. Nishadas were mountain dwellers, hunters. They were kings also. Everyone has heard of the Nala Damayanti story. You have heard of the Nala Damayanti story. Does it register that Nala was a king of the Nishadas? It does not. It is only for Ekalavya that it registers. Guha, who ferried Rama across, Dasharatha's friend who ferried Rama across, he was a Nishada. Dronacharya at that point in time was employed by the Kauravas to teach, I repeat, to teach the princess, the sons of kings. When Ekalavya comes to Dronacharya to be taught, Dronacharya never says in the Mahabharata, I will not teach you because you are a scheduled tribe. There was no scheduled tribe then. He says, whose son are you? I am employed to teach princess. What prince are you? So Ekalavya goes away. There is a second incident which is linked to the first, but in a way it's a separate incident when Ekalavya, of course, becomes extremely skilled in archery. And before that, when the Pandavas, 5 Pandavas and Dronacharya had gone to have a bath, a crocodile had seized Dronacharya by the thigh. And Arjuna rescued Dronacharya. So Dronacharya gave Arjuna a pledge. I will make you the best archer on earth. So when Ekalavya was discovered, then Arjuna said, what about your pledge? And again, this pledge comes into being. So, Dronacharya, therefore, it may be unfair, but all I'm saying is that he was acting in accordance with his pledge. Whenever I'm asked a question about Ekalavya, I ask a counter question. Who killed Ekalavya? You know. I'm sure very few people here know. Ekalavya was killed by Krishna because Ekalavya was allied to Jarasandha's army. So if you want to get a complete picture, that's also part of the picture, that Ekalavya belonged to the other side. You also asked a question about Itihas and Purana. So let me say this very quickly. Itihasa should not be translated as myth. Itihasa is itihi asa. This is what happened. So in a sense, it's history. I don't quite know why the Puranas have not been called Itihasa and why you have Itihasa Purana together. I don't know.
Very, very interesting. I have one more questions. It's not really, it has nothing to do with the Puranas and Itihasa, but the way, these days, a lot of us are using the word Hindutva uh, here in Nepal as well as in India. And Hindutva has been portrayed as a very bad thing. It's something which is not really happen, it's something like that. If Hindutva is so bad, then Hindutva comes from a Hinduism, right? Then Hinduism should be bad. Then as a scholar of the Sanskrit, I really wanted to know what is the difference between Hindutva and Hinduism. What should people be using?
Oh dear.
It's a
India's Supreme Court has pronounced on this also. Uh, I personally, Hindutva has come to mean a bad word. I personally prefer the word Hindutva. Hindutva conveys a sense of the truth. Twa, the twa suffix, tattva. Hinduism to me, the ism suffix connotes for me a sense of dogma. Communism, capitalism, socialism, all isms are like that. So my personal view is, no matter what that word is used for, the right word is Hindutva, the essence, the truth about Hinduism. Unfortunately, people who speak on either side, I think, are not very conversant with what our Shastras say.
Yes, thank you. Another question, I have one or two more questions. One is about the scriptures and the two about economy, and one about your own article that you have recently published. Since the Vedic age, Vedic time till today, a lot of things have changed in Bharat Varsha, basically. Yeah, many things have changed, and these scriptures carries a lot of jnana as well, and there is a big jnana as well. We somehow have not really been able to capture the big jnana that is there, and we have decided to go for a jnana. If you only go for a jnana, do you think we will be able to compete, or we will, we as a civilization will be able to compete in today's Vaishya Yuga, the mercantile time, when everybody talks about economy and nobody talks about the Shastra and all these things. There is also, I'm sure there is a saying, there is one Sanskrit sloka, in every time frame, there are certain things which have got advantage over, like, त्रेतायाम मंत्र शक्ति छ, ज्ञान शक्ति कृते युगे, द्वापरे युद्ध शक्ति छ, संघ शक्ति कली युगे. Means in today's world, the scriptures, the knowledge that we derive from scriptures may not be relevant. Since India, the Bharat wanted to become a economically powerful country by 2047. Do you think, to what extent these values that we derive from Shastras will be able to, elevate India's
Let me
economic
let
condition?
me let me respond to that at several different levels. The first level is what I said at the beginning. that let us not think that Hindutva or Hindu Shastras were only about moksha dharma. They were about pursuit of dharma, artha, and kama also. As long as there was balance between them, any disequilibrium is not desired. And hence there were texts, not just Kautilya, on governance, on the economy, on political economy. And remember, at one point in time, Bharatvarsha used to trade quite a bit, and the size of the economy, according to the Madison estimates, was fairly large. You use the word Vijnana in the way that it is usually used, which is in the sense of science and technology. In these texts that I'm talking about, Jnana and Vijnana are used in a slightly different sense. So let me mention that. Jnana is what I acquire from texts and from a guru. Vijnana is what I acquire through internal reflection. Our texts do not say it is this or that. But let me pick on that theme of governance initially. In the world today, there are two polar opposites. Those ideal polar opposites do not exist anywhere in the world, but nonetheless, one polar opposite is capitalism. I repeat, caricatures, because the ideals don't exist anywhere in the world. Capitalism, where every decision is taken by the individual, every decision is taken by the market. Socialism, where every decision is taken by the government, by the state. But we had a third model which we have forgotten about. And our third model was a large number of decisions were taken by the community. If you go back even 100 years in Bharatvarsha, there was a lot that the community did. We tended to forget about it after the first decade of the 20th century. I can give countless number of examples, whether it is in maintenance of civic works, maintaining waterworks, dispute resolution, the list goes on and on. And therefore, our texts give us this third model, which is a model not only for Bharatvarsha, which is a model for the entire world, where you did not need the government to deliver skills. The Srenis did that. You did not need a competition commission of India. The Srenis did that. And so on and so forth. You did not need the danda of corporate social responsibility. Two finer points, and then I will stop. One example from the Markandeya Purana. Two final examples, and then I will stop. In the Markandeya Purana, there is reference to a demoness named Jata Harini. What does Jata Harini do? Jata Harini, as the name implies, is a demoness who steals a newborn infant. So she steals the infant from your house, goes to another house, there is a newborn infant, replaces that, drops that one, goes to another house, and generally causes confusion. However, in addition, what the Jata Harini does is, it eats up every third child. What is this telling me? It is telling me that the infant mortality rate then was 1/3. Now, this is the reason why these Shastras deserve to be looked at by social scientists with a multidisciplinary lens. This is not only for Sanskritists. I have a 13th century, last sentence, I have a 13th century text which is called Chaurya Shastra. As the name implies, it is a manual for thieves. If I were to translate it, it will become a book of 400 pages. So it is unimaginable the kind of stuff that these Shastras covered. 95% of them have not been translated. If we don't translate them, if we don't read them, how will we know what is in them, what knowledge we are not aware of? Surely we cannot leave it to Harvard and MIT in Oxford and Heidelberg to tell us about these Shastras.
Thank you, sir. I still have one question, maybe later. This is basically about the article that you have written in the Leap, on 14th of August. Okay, we can do it later. Thank you very much for talking to us, sir. It's a great learning, and thank you so much. Thank you very much for bearing with me.
This was indeed very enriching, sir. Super intellectually stimulating. You are clearly an institution in yourself, and we got to learn a lot, sir, from you. So thank you so much. I'll request the team to please come up on the stage and felicitate our speakers.